Hey guys, welcome back to Coffee with Composers. This week we interview one of my great friends, Blair Borland. Blair is a fantastic composer. He's worked on projects including Apex Legends, Watchdog Legion, Mortal Kombat. He's also a really talented mock-up artist, probably one of the best out there. Check out his YouTube channel. And he's currently working on a really exciting new virtual instrument, which we talk about in the interview. Before we hop into that, though, I just want to say thanks again for checking out this podcast. It's been going really well. If you know a composer, orchestrator, music editor, copyist who you think would be interesting to chat with, shoot them my way. This video is a video podcast now. We have a YouTube component, which is youtube.com/@Joe_Chris_, the same handle I use across all my platforms. Anyway, let's just get to it and listen to Blair.
Awesome. Blair, thank you so much for joining us today. Would you mind just introducing yourself?
Yes. Well, I don't know exactly what you want to know, but I'm Blair. I'm a composer. I make composer tools. I am great at mock-ups. I've composed for a ton of big AAA games, and I like music, and I generally like life. So
Awesome. Yeah, you've worked on like Teen Titans, the Multiverses game, Mortal
yes,
Kombat, Apex
that
Legends.
honestly, yeah. So probably my favorite project I've ever done is I wrote the Teen Titans theme for Multiverses for Warner Brothers game Multiverses, and that was, I mean, that's like dream come true for me. Teen Titans are just my favorite thing, and yeah, absolutely love that. And the one that I always forget about too, the other one that I did that I loved, which is I wrote the music for the Penny series movie, which is Ryan Trahan. He's this big, like 20 million, 30, I don't know what he's at right now, but subscriber YouTube channel. And he's just a super nice guy. And I wrote the music for that Penny series movie that he released like a year ago or so. And
That's
so, yeah, totally.
awesome. So one thing that I think is really interesting in your career is you were not really a composer till like your mid-20s, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, so like I, uh, I was, so when I was, let's say 11 or 12, my Uncle Steve, who's definitely not listening to this, but I appreciate him anyway. Um, Shout out to Uncle Steve, who will not hear this. He gave me a Leonard Skinner CD, and and it's slightly embarrassing. I mean, now my political beliefs probably don't align as much with with my musical tastes when I was young, but I listened to Leonard Skinner, and I just loved the music so much. I just loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it, loved it. And so basically, in my eighth grade summer, or maybe it was seventh grade summer, I can't remember, I learned all of the songs off of their 30 album. Um, and which was like their big re-release, almost like an iTunes Essentials kind of thing, like that. And I mean, literally, I mean, I was 12. I was 12, and I learned every guitar solo from Leonard Skinner. And if you've heard Leonard Skinner, it's not easy stuff. And so, look, I've been good at music for a really long time. You know, I was touring with bands by the time I was 13 in my eighth grade summer. I did like a 2-week cross-country tour with a band, and who are all like 35-year-old. I mean, they're the age that I am now, but I was 13, and they were like, "Hey, this kid's good enough to be our electric guitar player," and I was, I was very good. I've always been, I've always taken to things super, super quickly, but I never stay with anything that long. I mean, I'm still just about as good of a guitar player as I was when I was 18 years old. And I could get better. I mean, but I'm more interested in just kind of like learning some new things and doing some different stuff, and so I've had kind of this weird career where I will get really great at something for a season, and then I'll kind of lose interest in it. And if I like, and I don't say this in any way um to be like braggy or anything like that, but like if at the age of 15 I had decided that guitar was what I wanted to do with my life, then I could be like one of the best guitar players in the world. But I keep getting to this place with every single skill that I ever have, which is like, I'm like, yeah, that was really fun. I got like really great at that. And I just kind of like just kind of go off and do something else, you know. So
Yeah.
it's been weird. And so I ended up getting into composing. Um, because I've always loved movies. When I was in high school, I watched a movie a day. I try and go to the theater at least twice a week still, and then me and my wife are rewatching through Buffy right now, which is super fun. Shout out to Buffy, such a fun show, and yeah, so like it was just an interest, and I graduated college, and I was really depressed, and I was teaching guitar lessons, which there's nothing inherently wrong with at all. But it just grated on my soul, and I didn't know what to do, and my wife suggested that I apply for Berkeley Valencia, which is this big master's program that they had in Spain. It's still currently going, and it was a great program for me. And I ended up applying to it. And I applied literally. So the late cutoff was like April 5th. And I think I applied for the program on like April 10th or something. So I applied late for the late deadline. And so the professors told me I got the last spot. And so which was like I was so excited about it. And so I mean it just kind of like sort of changed the direction of where I've headed and what I'm doing. And yeah, so that's, I mean, it would be, I wish I could like go through every facet of every detail and just say how I kind of got to where I've gotten. But it's like, it's so convoluted. It's crazy. But yeah,
Well, going off that, how did you go from like recent master student, grad student to working with Stephen Barton?
that, so one of the things that I do a ton of, lectures at universities around the country, and that is, I mean, one of the other things that I, which is like, it's like, Blair, what do you do? Yes, I do a lot of things. Um, I'm just interested in a lot of things, and so basically, I was in my master's program, and I uh, was a part of a Facebook group, and this is what my tie-in was, is I tell all of these students who I give lectures to is that these Facebook groups are really, really helpful. And most Gen Z don't have Facebook right now, and that's fine, honestly. If you can get by without a Facebook, get by without a Facebook. If as much social media as you can not be on is probably a healthy thing. I don't know. Um, but there are a handful of groups, I would say probably in the realm of 3 to 5, that a lot of the composers who you will want to be networking with are just on and relatively active in. And one of those groups was called Perspective, and I joined that group, and it really stressed me out. Everybody was so mean to each other. It was crazy, but but in the midst of that, I saw one guy who was like taking everybody to task and saying really controversial things like, "Hey, you should pay your interns." And that guy ended up being Stephen Barton. And so honestly, the very first thing that attracted me to Stephen Barton was his attitude. Um, and um, so I sent a message out to him, and I was like, "Hey, man, because at the time I thought I was going to be a teacher, and I like teaching. I like talking. Um, I like having conversations. I like sharing knowledge and information. Um, but but I was like, hey, if I could find somebody who's not an absolute tool bag to work with in Hollywood, that could kind of be fun. I would enjoy that. Um, and so I messaged him, and I was like, hey, I think you're really cool, and I really appreciate everything that you've been saying in the perspective group. Um, and if you ever need an assistant or anything, I just let me know. And he basically was like, hey, why don't you send me? Um, I mean, I think he was first off like, thank you, and then he was like, why don't you send me a reel and a resume or something? And so I did, and I think that was like I graduated in June, so that must have been like April or May that I sent that in. And I never heard back from him. And so obviously I was like, I immediately assumed that he hated my guts, he hated my music, that I was the worst musician and composer to ever live in the history of music, and I was like, okay, great, and I accepted a teaching job in Seattle at a Tacoma School of the Arts, which I absolutely loved. Um, and then, for unrelated reasons, in August of that year, I took a trip down to LA because my dad was working for this company in LA. Um, as like a consultant, and they heard that I played music, and they wanted me to play their like end of summer party that they that they had, and I was like, great, like I'll do it for free if you buy me a ticket down to LA to hang out for a couple of days. And they were like, great. So they paid like $300 to get me a ticket down. Actually, I think me and Rosemary, my wife. And so, we came down and did that. And while I was there, I met with a bunch of people, and I decided to reach out to Steven again. And I was like, hey, hey Steven, I think you're in LA. Do you want to meet? And he was like, yeah. And so we did, and we ended up talking for like 2 or 3 hours, and more or less he ended up offering me a job on the spot. Now, I like to say this caveat here, which is that job did not start for another 16 to 18 months. And a lot of times that is how this kind of stuff can work. For instance, I work a little bit with like John Debney. And it's been the same thing. He offered me a job 2 years ago, and it hasn't started yet. And it's like, I mean, so I think this is kind of one of the funny things about the industry is, like you can be great, you can be doing everything great, and then uh, it just takes a lot of time for these things to come into fruition. It definitely can. And so you just kind of have to like figure out what your rhythm is and kind of go for that instead of trying to make things happen. Just do your thing, and then the stuff will come through eventually, maybe.
That very insightful, and I actually want to offer you a counterpoint based on my observations
Please.
with you and my research.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I really admire is your ability to make your own opportunities. You're not
Mm,
just doing your own, like I'm composing, whatever. You're going out, you're watching short films, messaging directors, you're
mm.
interacting with Stephen Barton on Facebook, and you also have another gig going on right now with an AI music company. Would you kind of
Yes.
talk about this whole process of making
That's
your
great.
own?
Let me respond to your counterpoint, and then I'll respond to the Ace Studio stuff, which is to the counterpoint. I think we're talking about two different sides of the same coin. In other words, I think it's semantics in the sense that I learned pretty early on that the and this I mean this sounds maybe almost defeatist, but I don't mean it to. I actually mean it to sound hopeful. But I learned pretty early on that the only person that I could depend on for anything in Hollywood was myself. And so I think that pretty early on I started to learn, because honestly, I'll be totally honest with you, and I hope that this is helpful for the listeners. I think I went through like 2 or 3 years.
Hey
The
Blair,
only one.
Blair, I'm sorry, we kind of
Oh,
cut out there.
no
We
worries,
went two or
man.
3 years.
I had 2 or 3 years with Stephen Barton where I really wanted him to be like the only work that I was doing. And like I was really kind of like, oh, I was hoping for that. I was almost kind of depending on that. And and uh and it led to nothing good. And I don't mean my relationship with Stephen Barton, but that kind of like over insistence on uh just getting all of your work from one place, and basic, putting all of your eggs in one basket, more or less, right? um and and so I kind of learned like, okay, well, I'm just going to get my opportunities from wherever I can get them. And so the A Studio AI thing is a really good segue there, which is oh, sorry, I've always been really interested in mockups, right? If anybody has followed my YouTube, blah blah blah, Instagram, whatever, um, they'll know that I spend a fair amount of time trying to make my mockups just about, I mean, as top level as I can possibly get them. Um, and so more or less, as I've worked on these mock-ups, I've gotten to the point where I think I have made them about 97% as good as a mock-up can be. And I'm still dissatisfied. I'm still very dissatisfied. So my thought process in the last 2 to 3 years has shifted from how do I make my mock-ups better to how do I make the technology of mock-ups better? And I mean, in the last 2 or 3 years, what has come out? AI. And I'm definitely not the kind of person who's like, hoorah, rah, AI. I love it so much. But I'm also not the person who is really scared of new technology either. Within 50 to 100 years, all of our cities could be powered by nuclear. Also, I think the atomic bomb is a terrible thing. And so, I think that there has to be this balance, this open-handedness where you can realize that a technology can be used for bad and used for good. And so I found this company, Ace Studio, and what really intrigued me about them is that they were doing this kind of ethical AI thing. And I don't know why I'm putting that in quotes because it's actually real. It's actually ethical, in the sense that they're legally licensing all of their material. And then what we do is we make these incredibly high quality recordings, and maybe record like an hour of material. So we just did violas the other day, right? Um, and and I mix that to sound like violas would sound in a movie soundtrack. And maybe I'll do a couple mixes of it, like a John Williams type mix and a Hans Zimmer type mix, whatever. Um, and and then what that does is that that kind of kernel of that hour of material goes into the model and sort of trains the model. And what I like to say is it sharpens the model. The model already has a general idea of what strings sound like. It has a general idea of what violas sound like. But then we record this huge amount of material that we are recording, that we are working on. We're actually crafting the library. It's not just like spitting something out like Sora. It's like this Sora stuff is crazy to me because it's like, you know, uh, uh, I mean, just training on like Pixar movies and like Warner Brothers movie, and it's like, on one hand, it's like I think that creative laws should maybe be a little bit less on the creator, but I think maybe a little bit more on companies. like I don't think that companies should just be able to steal a bunch of stuff and create create an AI that does everything. I really think you need to do the hard work of getting there. And so that's one of the things that really attracted me about Ace. And so basically I just reached out to them and I was like, not to sound crass about it, but I reached out to them and I was like, hey, you know how you could make a lot of money? And I was like this, if we could make like really the best sounding mock-up, the best sounding, excuse me, sample library. It's not even a sample library. What do you even call it? I don't know. Like the best sounding orchestral virtual instrument of all time. And I was like, I think I know how to get us there. And so I gave him this big pitch of what my involvement could look like. And so yeah, I mean, recently I've been hired on, which is a new, oh, sorry, did I pause for just 1 second?
Yeah, you got hired on.
No, I mean, this is one of the other crazy things and good things about my life. I live in the middle of nowhere, which I absolutely love. I live in like the peninsula in Washington State. And I mean, I live in the middle of this like 13-acre, I don't want to call it a farm, but property, in like this cottage that literally the locals call the Shire, because it literally looks a little bit like a Shire, and but I mean, me and my wife house sit, and that's like one of our things that we do. Anyway, that is neither here nor there, but it just goes to show kind of the ADHD nature of my life, which is a lot. I mean, there's a lot going on, but it's all fun. Anyway, so can you remember at all where I was at with the Ace Studio stuff?
The last part I heard was you got hired on.
I got hired on as the director of Ace Orchestral, which is actually a completely new division of the company. And so, I mean, I was able to pitch them this idea that not only are we making this library, but we're creating this entirely new division of the company that is devoted to making these virtual instruments, but hopefully virtual instruments that are more lifelike, more realistic, and better sounding than any sample library you've ever used, and easier to use. And so I'm pretty excited about it.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like an exciting project. You and I have talked at length about it outside of this, and
Yeah.
really exciting stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
definitely excited for sure.
And you were also like making your own opportunities back on the composing side, where you were just, what was it, an hour a day reaching out to filmmakers, only the ones you like enjoyed the films of, or what was
Yeah,
that
totally.
process?
So I mean that was something that I did a while back, which is I took let's say like 30 minutes to an hour a day. Um and I just watched short films on YouTube, any that I could get my hands on. And basically I just did this thing where if I liked a film, I reached out to the director. And you know, I mean, here's the deal. So the general business knowledge um, is that you get for every 10 requests, you get one yes. I have found in composing that for every 100 requests, you get one yes. Um, and so I reached out to about 100 or 200 filmmakers in that way. And and yeah, I mean that's how the Ryan Trahan thing came through. I didn't reach out directly to Ryan Trahan. I reached out to another filmmaker who ended up introducing me to Ryan Trahan, and that was very cool. Um, but yeah, I think I got like two, maybe three short films from that, and then I got a few that were like, "Hey, we're really interested," or "Hey, we're doing a DVD re-release of that exact short film, and we really want to redo the score because it's not our favorite." And you know, so like, uh, yeah, I mean, I mean like a lot of composers. I'm not unique in working hard. Um but I've definitely tried to find ways to coerce people to working with me. Uh,
Yeah, no, you are phenomenal at that. And just going back to the social media thing, I can think of two examples that you've put out content that I think led to at least conversations for you. You
yeah,
made your Avengers Endgame
yeah,
suite on YouTube that popped off. And
yeah,
then on Instagram, which is actually how we met, your Logic template, where
yeah.
you were doing these like really cool, it's set up to, if you're not aware, your Logic template is set up to have multiple mixes from different composers at the same time, right?
Uh-huh.
You got to talk about both of
It
those
yeah,
things. And
it's I mean it's honestly so if you're listening to this and you know and you want to know anything about me, I don't want to assume that you do, but if you do, go to my Instagram and just scroll through a bit. I literally think I've only posted like 30 times on Instagram. I am the world's worst social media guy. But one of the things that I've posted is my Logic template, and I do these things right now. I do these things where I will absolutely freak out on a hyper focus for a couple months, a year, you know, and music is like a general hyperfixation that lasts for a while for me. Um, but it still has waves. It goes up and down. And so what I had gotten into trying to, in my mind, build like the perfect Logic template. And so in the process of doing that, I got super into the environment in Logic, and I created this MIDI system in Logic where with the click of one button, I could completely change the mic mix of every single instrument in my template. And so for instance, you know, you know, because most sample libraries will come with mic positions of you know, probably a close mic, a decatry mic, and a room mic, and most even come with more than that. But at the very least, you know, that those three, and and so I decided to route those up to MIDI faders in Logic's environment. And then I decided to route those MIDI faders to group MIDI faders, which also had to have these logic transformers things to make sure that they adjust it at the right, like, because it's this crazy process. And then I have those MIDI faders set up to MIDI buttons, and those MIDI buttons have um, like values inherent to them that are sending out to these various faders that I have. So I'll press a button and every single mic in the entire Logic template changes. Um, and yeah, when I showed that, I definitely I definitely got a lot of people being like, "What is this? Like, this is crazy." And then also with the Avengers thing, I mean, literally, I sent the Avengers mock-up to John Debney, and John Debney got back to me and he's like, "Blair, this is the best mock-up I've ever heard." And I was like, "What?" First of all, you don't get out enough. But second of all, thank you very much. and but like, yeah, so I mean, I think for me, um the whole aspect of putting yourself out there, and I think I also, one of the things that I want to talk about is and I think, Joe, I can't remember, I think you and I have talked about this a little bit in the terms of some of the piano tuning stuff that we've done together. But so I'm autistic. And so I think a lot of people who are watching this may be like, "Oh, Blair, maybe you seem like perfectly fine and charming." Honestly, this is my mask that you're looking at right now. Is that, and I don't mean it in the sense that like I'm intentionally lying to anybody. It's just like this is me on like 4,000 milligrams of caffeine. Metaphorically speaking. Um, I don't drink caffeine because it makes me feel so bad. But like uh, basically I'm working through some like pretty severe kind of disability stuff on my end, which is one of the reasons that I like do so many different things. And I mean, it's hard to even get into, but more or less, one of the things that has been a defining piece of advice for my life is a really great little quote by Temple Grandin. Temple Grandin is an autism advocate. She has autism. And she's just so cool. She's just the coolest. She like designs. I mean, this sounds like weird or maybe morbid, but it's just so fascinating. She designs these like like gate systems for slaughterhouses, and which is, I mean, when you think about what I do with my template, I mean, it's a very similar kind of thing of the way that her brain works, of just kind of like finding these systems that kind of like work with the cows, that make sure their last moments are peaceful, and like, which is just this really kind of weird and interesting thing. I find it to be very similar to my Ace Studio AI stuff, where it's like nobody wants to talk about slaughtering cows. But like, if you're one of those people who's like, well, I'm interested in AI and I want to try and find an ethical and cool way to do it, then like I want to figure out that system. And so she has this quote, more or less, that just says, um, she's always looking for the back door of a job. I mean, personally, and people might be interested in knowing this, but I have never gotten a job from sending out a resume. I've never gotten a job from an application and an interview in my entire life. Like,
Wow.
not one. Not a single one. Um, and so, I mean, people might be like, "Blair, how's that possible? How have you survived?" In a lot of cases, I haven't really survived. like, I've been dependent on the support of others in a lot of times, even in my adult life. Um, and that's this weird thing. Not to get super deeply into the autism stuff, but that is this weird thing about autism, is that simultaneously you might look at me and be like, Blair is like one of the more skilled people I've ever met. And I don't know if you think that or not, but you might look at me and think something like that, based on my template or based on my mock-ups or based on Apex Legends or Teen Titans or whatever it is. Also, you would be so surprised to know how little my life is together. And so, and I think there's this kind of weird dichotomy of of me being um me being like insanely talented at a fair amount of things, um but also, I would say that in some pretty um in some pretty how do you say this? Just major ways. I'm probably at about the life stage of a neurotypical 25-year-old, and I'm 34. So I'm learning. I'm learning, and I'm making my way through life. But it's coming at a different pace, which is fine than a lot of other people. And I think I spent a lot of time feeling ashamed about that. But no longer. Just you know.
What are some ways you've kind of found that were helpful for you in this?
That's a really good question. Um, I think that I'll say some things that have been specifically helpful for me, a neurodivergent or diverse person, but also that maybe will be helpful for neurotypical people in general as well. I think one of the things for for me has been um, how do let me think about how I want to phrase this for a second. Um, to take to take your support that you need very seriously. Um, and so what I mean by that is that when I moved down to LA, I me and Rosemary probably definitely inadvisably, we started renting a house for $2,400 a month. Um, in LA, which now, I mean, $2,400 a month gets you like a studio apartment. But we were renting a house there for $2,400 a month because, I mean, in some ways, Steven had kind of like promised me the world. He's like, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do this. And I'm like, man, I'm so excited. So I got my parents to co-sign with me on not on buying a house, just to rent an apartment. And or a house, a little house in Reseda. Um, and and we were so excited. We were going to do foster care. Life was going to be perfect. We were just so excited about this thing. And we moved into this house, I think in July um, of maybe 2017, 2018. And then my work with Steven didn't start until February of the following year. And so I mean, $2,400 a month, um, making zero income, zero for at least 6 months, 6 to 8 months, or something like that. Um, and I lost 30 pounds, and my stomach felt like it was on fire constantly. And I had no idea what was going on. One of the side effects of my autism is I have a really hard time understanding what I'm feeling internally. Um, and um and so I was just like, I'm losing weight and I have no idea why. Doctor's like, are you stressed out? I'm like, nah. Which and so, but it's like, but now I look back and I'm like, okay, like I've learned the signs, but so, but but I think that the older I get, the more I realize that like none of us are supposed to make it without support. And I think that we're a super individualistic society, which I think in some ways can be really cool because you're trying to make it on your own, and there's a kind of thing about that that's like great. Um, but I think that generally, by and large, humans as a species, we do better together. And I think it took me a decade of my adult life, more, probably a decade and a half, to start to realize that it's really deeply okay to ask for some help when you need it, you know? Uh, and uh, and so I think that one of the caveats I always like to say when I talk about this kind of stuff too is I realize that not everybody's in a situation where I mean, you might be assuming that I asked my rich parents for help, which I mean, I kind of I did in a sense, but I mean, I think a lot of it is like asking Rosemary's mom if she'll come over and help us clean the house. You know what I mean? Like I think it goes deeper than just having or not having financial help from parents or something like that. Although if that is something that you have and you need it, then I want people to know there's absolutely zero embarrassment for asking for help or support when you need those things. But it can be even better than that. I mean, it can be even different than that. Like asking a friend if they'll go to a movie with you, asking for help cleaning your house up. Like, I think taking when you start to feel like your body is at its breaking point, if you have any kind of support system whatsoever, and I would go as far to say that probably 90% of people do, which if you're one of those 10% of people, I'm very sorry. And I've been there before. But if you do, make use of your support system. Don't do life alone. You can do better with a little bit of help, I promise you.
Awesome, awesome. Wow. I,
Yeah.
I think that's one of my favorite conversations with you so far. That was
Oh, I'm
great.
glad. I'm glad. Oh, I'm so glad.
So that was just awesome. Just going back to music, you're kind of like the mock-up expert in my eyes. What kind of
No.
things do you what kind of things do you do differently, like with your mock-ups or with your setup just in general that you think
Yeah,
might be worth exploring for anyone getting into that sort of thing?
I think the first thing to explore. So if you, again, if you have any interest in following any of my work, um, go listen to the Hercules mock-up that I did. It's on my YouTube, and excuse me,
And what is the name of your YouTube channel just before
it's just Blair Loves Music, same as my Instagram.
beautiful.
And so that one is really unique and interesting in that I was experimenting with just using one mic signal. And that one mic signal from the sample library, I think the sample libraries that I used was Sable, which is like an OG version of Spitfire's chamber strings. I mean, I think that Sable is like what they came out with in like 2001 or something like that. And or like mid 2000s, somewhere around there. And I basically muted every single mic position except for the Decatree. And I did that um, for every single instrument of the entire orchestra. And more or less in that, I kind of had a realization that if you're trying to make orchestral music and an orchestral mock-up and you want it to sound good, start with the Decatree. I mean, that is the sound of the orchestra. It is the sound of the orchestra. Now, the different sounds that we tend to get, um, let me go on two ends of the spectrum here. Uh, let's say Lord of the Rings is on one end of the spectrum, and let's say The Mandalorian is on another end of the spectrum. Lord of the Rings, it's a huge sound, and so most people would think that to get that huge sound from Lord of the Rings. Well, I mean, I don't know what they'd think, but they might think like, oh, there's a particular mic array that you would get to get that particular sound, and then on Mandalorian, the other side, you have a very, I mean, listen to the Mandalorian. You're going to be so surprised. Anybody who listens to the Mandalorian, think of it in terms of like, how does this compare to like a John Williams mix or something like that? It is so tight and it is so close. It's so close mic'd. It's crazy. Um, and and most people think that like, or they might think like, oh, there's a particular type of mic array that you do to get each of these sounds, and it's not really that. On this spectrum, you start with a Decatree, and how you achieve both of these sounds is just by layering in some other mics. That's basically it. And so let's say Decatree. That is your first, let's say that's John Williams. That's kind of like your main John Williams sound, which is like a Decatree with some close mics sprinkled in there to get that like that almost ASMR-y kind of thing up top. And then on the other side, you have Lord of the Rings, which is Decatree, but with, let's say, outriggers or maybe surround mics. I'm not sure exactly what mics that they've used, but they're these big mics that I mean, the mics themselves are not big. They're this wide array of mics that are put on each different side of the orchestra. And then you layer those into your Decatree, and it starts making things seem like, oh my gosh, this is recorded in a massive hall, because it is recorded in a massive hall. But it makes it feel even more spacious. And then on the other end of things, Mandalorian, you've got your Decatree, but then you're bringing up the spot microphones of the section, so the section microphones, and then you're bringing up those close microphones quite high as well. Um, And so in 90% of cases, maybe more, this is how this mix is going to work, is that you are going to have this main array, right? This decatree, which is your left, front, and right mics that are right above the composer, and they kind of capture everything. And it's a really great way of making strings sound a little bit close, woodwind sounding a little bit further, brass sounding a little bit further, and percussion and maybe chorus or your choir just sounding super, super far away, because that it's a standardized mic position. And so when you use that in your mockup, when you use that standardized mic position in your mockup, you're not getting the ear of the engineer of the library, who in a lot of cases, they're listening to that in a very isolated way, where and this is one of the really cool things about the Ace AI stuff that we're doing, is we're actually recording the entire orchestra playing a singular piece. And so when I go back and mix the orchestra playing that piece, the mixes that you will get from the library are mixes that are actually mixed in context with the rest of the orchestra. And so your brass, when you play it at first, when you eventually do play, French horns or something like that, you might think to yourself, oh, these French horns sound like weirdly distant or something like that. But when you start playing it in context of the full orchestra, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, this is three-dimensional. This is actually working, because we can do something here where we're not mixing it in isolation, but rather we're mixing it as an entire, as a whole with the orchestra, and bringing all of those sections together. And each section gets their own mix, but it's done within the process of, or it's done in context to the entire orchestra. And so a lot of these sample libraries, their mixes, and I think Cinematic Studio Strings is a great example. I love Cinematic Studio Strings, but the mixes are a little strange sometimes. And I think a lot of times those mixes are done while the engineer, whoever that engineer is listening to the sounds of just that one violin or that one viola. And so you're going to make very different decisions when you're mixing something in isolation than when you're mixing it in context of everything, right? And so that is my main kind of I guess advice, is start with that decatree. Start with that contextual piece of equipment. It's the only contextual piece of equipment that you really can start with in making a mock-up. So start there. And then if you're like, wow, I really like that. And like I said, my Hercules mock-up, it's just decatree, completely just decatree. But then from that point on, like if you're like me, you might say, I really liked that. But maybe the strings sound a little too far away for me. Okay, great. Now we're getting somewhere. We can bring the close mics up just a little bit. Okay, listen to that in context of everything you've done. That sounds great. And then also having references. I mean, I realize that's like the most, noob advice, but I mean, references. I will mix a little bit of my piece. I'll listen to John Williams. And not even for his writing, but for the Sean Murphy mix, and those mixes are weird in a sense. They're really, really super like really fizzy. Anyway, those are some pieces of advice. Long rambling pieces of advice.
No, that was great. That was great. How do you feel that your final mock-up comes down in terms of your mixing ability, like plugins, mic choices, versus your MIDI performance itself? Like, how would you weight them?
That's a great question. I think it's hard for me to say, because there are certain, I think all of us have this in life, where there are certain abilities that come natural, and there are certain abilities that are really hard fought and hard won, And I think for me, my mixing ability is hard fought and hard won. My ability to naturally kind of emote with music and make an emotional performance, it's a very just kind of natural thing for me. And I think that comes a lot from, I mean, maybe it was hard fought and hard won back when I learned guitar and I learned how to improvise and to solo on guitar, but I think that once that became a part of my vernacular, is how do you, da 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 da, like how do you make a phrase, sing? Like that's sort of a very personal thing. So like what I would say is it's probably 50-50. You know, I mean, maybe that's a cop-out answer, but it's probably 50-50. But I have not worked very hard at all on being an incredible mock-up programmer. Um, I have worked very hard on getting my mixes to a point where the instruments sit in a really natural space.
Hmm.
And generally speaking, when I like, you know, I mean, we talked about maybe me plugging my teaching or whatever, but it's like when I work with students and whatnot, um, I I generally find that when I help them do a few things to their mix, their mock-ups get like 100% better. They get like 50% better or something like that, like really, really, really quickly. I think a lot of people don't have a hard time with like, this is how I want my music to sound. This is the velocity that I want my violins at. I mean, some people like, I will have students who like for a year, I'm like, you have to stop just using the legato patch. You need to use the staccato patch sometimes. But generally speaking, as long as you get over a few humps like that, then getting that mix set up is just a great way to make it sound realistic, even if it's not perfectly realistic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Uh, three last things I want to go over. First off, you have a very unique studio setup, right? That you're
Yes,
very
I
proud
do have
of.
a very unique. Yeah, so here, let me my studio's incredibly dirty right now. But yeah, it's funny that you noticed. But I mean, really, you can't see it right now because my desk is you know, in front of me. But I have a my entire rig is based off of a like an $8,000 MacBook Pro, and I don't say that to gloat whatsoever. I bought it because I this is going to sound like the most privileged thing in the entire world, but really, I want you to instead think of it as the most autistic thing in the entire world, which is that I hate external hard drives so much. Um, and so I decided to drop an extra 2 to 4 grand on having 8 uh, terabyte. I can't remember how. Yeah, 8 terabytes. Definitely not gigabytes of internal storage on my MacBook Pro. But it's like the 128 gigabytes of RAM. Blah blah blah. And so I have this set up where it's basically just my laptop. And then a lot of times I'll have my iPad right here as an additional display, and then I'll have scores on this big vertical screen. And again, this just kind of goes back to almost kind of what I was saying about support with the autism stuff, which is like I got to a point where I was in very similar to your studio, which to be clear, I love, but what I like to call the composer spaceship, where I mean literally, I was waking up in the morning, and I was like really anxious about going into my office. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to go into my office at all. And like anxious in a way that like really made it so that I couldn't work for months. Um, and so I just decided to like completely rethink the way that a modern composer's setup needs to happen, because I mean, I think that with technology being what it is, the fact that I could run a AAA game, um, and simultaneously a movie and an Apple TV show off of this laptop. I could do an entire thing just off of this laptop. So I was like, if I can do this entire thing off of a laptop, then why am I forcing myself to sit at the composer spaceship for, you know, for 10 hours a day just because it looks cool and I'm not comfortable? And so I just put a couch in my office, which you can just barely see. You know, and it's like I put a couch in my office, and I'll literally lay down, and I have this C desk that like I will lay down and I will work on this desk right here and like program stuff or work on stuff. And you know, so it's just all been based around being comfortable, being happy, you know, like not treating myself like a workhorse, but treating myself like my own collaborator and partner in making creative works, you know.
Yeah, it's also very mobile, right? If you're working off a laptop, you can kind of have a little more freedom.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, totally. So one of my favorite things to do is There's this really beautiful library next to where I live with just this gorgeous view of Seattle from across the water, and I'll just go there and I'll work for like 2 hours or something like that. And so I think you can see from my personality and everything that we've talked about today that like I have high excellence in a lot of ways, but also like I'm just all over the place, and so like I said, like if you and this is advice that can just be for everybody. If you don't treat yourself like a workhorse who has to get all the stuff done, but if you treat yourself like a trusted friend and collaborator, then the amount of stuff that you can do could really surprise you, because you're not just kind of like slave driving yourself, but rather you're working with yourself like as a trusted partner and as a friend. And so I think that different way of thinking about it has really changed. I mean, really my entire life, and the way that I work. And I think that just my weird little office is a small microcosm of that.
Hmm. Yeah, and speaking of kind of having your hand all over the place and getting into different things, you also have a side career doing like piano tunings in the
Yes.
Seattle area, right?
Yes. So I mean, the thing about composing, I love composing, but I've had months of composing where I've made over $50,000 in a month. Um, I've also have years of composing where I make nothing, bupkis, just absolutely nothing. And so I think this is another thing that I say to like these students who I talk to in these undergrad programs, and in some cases graduate programs. But it's like, look, be a composer. Like I think I had a lot of people come and talk to us when I was at Berkeley, and they kind of took like one of two perspectives. One is like, this is the best, this is the greatest work you'll ever do, blah blah blah. And then the second people are like, get out while you still can. And I think that there's kind of like uh, a really happy middle there, where both sides could probably agree, which is do this if you really want to do this because it's awesome. It's really fun. It's really cool. There's a lot of great things. And also at the same time, be prepared for how inhospitable this work can be sometimes. Be prepared for how tumultuous this work can be sometimes. Um, and for me personally, uh, I one of the ways that I keep that tumultuousness at bay is I tune pianos. And so, I mean, tuning pianos is fantastic. I make like lawyer money. I make like $140 an hour or something like that tuning pianos. And I tune pianos 1 or 2 days a week. And it just really helps my life from being this with composing work where it's total feast or famine to just being like this. And then every once in a while there's a this, but there's no this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's not, my life is not tanking ever. Here, I'll go back to my normal spot. Um, and so this is just another example of like taking your own support really taking your own support really seriously. Is there might be some ways of like, oh, I'm just gonna tough it out and I'm gonna work at Starbucks for 50 hours a week and then I'm gonna write tracks for 30 hours a week. And before you know it, you're burnt out by the age of 27, and like it's like and you have nowhere to go and nothing to do and you literally can't move. um and I think there's better ways to do it. So piano tuning has been one of those things for me that it's like, man, I really like this. It's pretty easy to get it going, and it's made my life a lot better. So I'm really enjoying it, honestly.
Awesome, awesome. My last question I really want to get into was, do you have any last minute advice for early career composers who either are just starting out or are trying to go from composing here and there to more full time?
Yeah. Um, let's see. The one thing that I would say is from just starting out to full time, that journey is a long one. The first bit of advice I ever remember getting from Stephen Barton, who by the way now is a Grammy winning composer for the sequel in the Star Wars Jedi games. Sorry, I'm butchering it. I can't remember what the games are called. I don't play games. I'm sorry. but which is, yeah, the great irony of my career is I've had such success with with video games, and it's like I think I've played Grand Theft Auto for like a grand total of 10 hours in my entire life, and that's the extent of my video game experience. Which, I mean, it's fun, it's crazy. I think that the first bit of advice that I ever remember Stephen Barton giving to me is that a composing career will take in the realm of 10 to 15 years to set up. So I just want everybody to think about that. 10 to 15 years. There will be 10 to 15 years of your life where you are not fully employed as a composer. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones and you make it in 5. That's great. That's awesome. I'm so proud of you. I would be so happy to be proved wrong. But I wouldn't even be proved wrong because it's more of a general statistic than it is, or even like a general like composing proverb than it is straight up, like facts. All I would say is if you are prepared for that, you can have a really fun and lovely time doing this. The funnest times, the best times that I've ever had composing are when I am not depending on it for my meaning. There's a direct correlation between depending on composing for my meaning in life and how terrible of a time I have with it. And so if you can just be prepared for this to take a long time, know that your life is probably also going to include some other jobs. I once went to, I think this is a good example. I once attended a mixing session at Capitol Records in LA, like that very, very big, like the cool, like circular building that if you know anything about music, I mean, Capitol Records is a major, major thing. Frank Sinatra recorded there. And I went in, and the mixing engineer was like putting together the session. We all did that. It was great. And then we all left. We went out to the parking lot, and the mixing engineer goes up to his car, and it's like a 2001, like so busted up, like Honda minivan, that it's like clear that he bought for like $500 somewhere. And what I don't mean to do by that is to judge him at all. What I'm saying is that there's this weird dichotomy of being in this industry where you can be working at the top of the industry and it's not particularly showing up in your paycheck yet. And so what I'm not saying is it's important what kind of car you drive, or that he drives. What I'm saying, oh, sorry, I broke up for just 1 second. I'm not saying he's any kind of worse person for what car he drives or anything like that. What I am saying is that sometimes in this career you can have incredible gains on the creative side of things and not so incredible gains on the financial side of things. It can also be outsized the other direction. So what I would say to new composers, new people getting into this industry, is that it's gonna be a ride. Be prepared for it to be a ride. You might go to Capitol Records and then go home the next day and your landlord raises your rent $400 a month and you have to move out of your apartment. True story. And like it's going to be crazy. Be prepared for it to be crazy. And as long as you're prepared for it to be crazy, you're going to be plenty happy and have a really great time doing this. But I mean, maybe that's scary advice, but it's for the most part true.
Blair, thank you so much. This has been so informative, so helpful. I got a lot out of this, and I'm sure the listeners will too. For anyone who wants to follow you, get in touch about lessons, or check out your work, where could they find you?
Yeah, so just Blair Loves Music. Any of my social media is all Blair Loves Music, YouTube, Instagram. And then listen to my music, Blair Borland, just on anywhere that plays music. And then and also if anybody's interested in lessons or whatever, they can just reach out to me on Instagram. I get back pretty quickly.
And what sort of things you teach in lessons? Just
Oh, I mean, a lot of stuff that we're talking about is a lot of this kind of stuff. But I try and balance things between, um, really, first of all, like talking to people about what their situation is and what will help in their situation. So there's a big mentoring component of it. But also on the other side of things, uh, there's a huge like production element of it because the reality is that you could have the most assured head on your shoulders in the world, but if you're not actually making good music, then I mean, people aren't going to call you. I'm so sorry. But the opposite is also true. You can have just like the best music, but if you're an absolute jerk, for the most part, people are not going to call you. I think you'll get a little bit more work, and unfortunately, this says probably a lot about the state of Hollywood. You'll probably get more work being a fantastically talented jerk than you will be, a super nice person who is not good. But both are very important.
Yeah, that was a great interview with Blair. If you enjoy this podcast, share it with a friend. Join the YouTube. Let me know. It helps so much knowing the numbers are people behind them and not just numbers. One person DMing me, which was great, is so much more than seeing 200 downloads just because, you actually can put a face to the value. And I do appreciate it. So let me know. Share it with a friend or give me feedback, and I'll see you next week.